There is a moment that rarely announces itself. No collapse. No dramatic breaking point. Just a quiet awareness that the mind has not rested in a long time. Thoughts move constantly, even in stillness. One reflection leads to another, memories replay. Without invitation, conversations are rehearsed long after they end. The mind narrates everything, correcting, questioning, anticipating. Over time, this inner activity becomes so familiar that it fades into the background, like a noise no longer consciously heard. Many live inside this tension without naming it. They function. They respond. They smile when expected, yet beneath daily routines, something remains tight. An invisible strain, a sense of always being mentally on, even in moments meant for rest. This is where recognition begins, not as insight, but as fatigue. The realization often arrives during silence, late at night, in empty rooms, in moments when distraction falls away and the mind turns inward, restless and unsatisfied. Peace feels distant, almost unfamiliar. The body may be still, but the mind continues its quiet resistance. What makes this tension difficult to recognize is how normal it feels. For many, this internal pressure has existed for so long that it feels like personality rather than condition. Overthinking becomes mistaken for responsibility. Self-criticism feels like self-awareness. Mental vigilance feels like maturity. Yet something subtle feels wrong. The mind does not feel like a place of refuge. It feels like a space that must be managed, endured, survived. Even moments of happiness are often accompanied by an undercurrent of monitoring, waiting for the next thought, the next worry, the next internal interruption. Recognition does not mean understanding everything at once. It simply means noticing the relationship, seeing that the mind is no longer a quiet companion, but an opposing force. A place where rest feels earned rather than allowed. This chapter is not about solutions. It is about honesty. About acknowledging that the struggle is not always external. That sometimes the deepest exhaustion comes not from life itself, but from the constant effort of living inside one's own thoughts. And in that recognition, something important begins, not change, but awareness. A pause in the long habit of fighting oneself. The mind does not become restless without reason. It learns long before the inner tension is noticed, long before exhaustion sets in. The mind is shaped by environments where safety is uncertain and acceptance feels conditional. Not always through trauma that can be easily named, but through small, repeated moments that quietly teach vigilance. For some, emotions were inconvenient, too much, too sensitive, too slow. The unspoken message was clear: feeling freely was risky. So the mind stepped in, learning to monitor reactions before they could be seen. Thoughts became filters. Feelings became things to manage rather than experience. For others, love arrived inconsistently. Praise appeared when expectations were met. Silence followed when they were not. In these spaces, the mind learned to anticipate rather than trust, to scan for potential mistakes, to stay alert, always preparing for what might go wrong. This is how control begins, not as dominance, but as protection. The developing mind adapts by staying active. It replays interactions. It rehearses future conversations. It analyzes tone, timing, and meaning, not out of obsession, but out of survival. If everything is predicted, nothing can surprise. If every thought is examined, nothing dangerous can slip through. Over time, this vigilance becomes internalized. Even when the external environment softens, the mind does not receive the update. It continues guarding against threats that no longer exist, enforcing rules that once provided safety, but now produce strain. What complicates this pattern is how rewarded it often becomes. Thoughtfulness is praised, responsibility is admired, emotional restraint is seen as strength. Rarely does anyone question the cost of constantly being mentally prepared. So the mind remains on duty. It learns to associate calm with vulnerability, stillness with risk, silence with the possibility of unresolved emotion rising to the surface. And so it stays busy, filling space with thought, analysis, and quiet control. Understanding this origin matters, not to assign blame, but to dissolve self-judgment. The restless mind is not broken, it is loyal. It learned to protect before it learned to rest. And until this is recognized, peace will always feel unfamiliar, like a language never spoken in childhood. Peace is often imagined as something gentle, soft, relieving. Yet for many, when the mind begins to quiet, something uneasy follows. The absence of noise can feel strange, even uncomfortable. Without constant thought, there is a sense of exposure, as if something essential has been removed. The mind, long accustomed to movement, does not interpret stillness as safety. It interprets it as uncertainty. From a psychological perspective, this reaction is not resistance, it is conditioning. A mind trained to stay alert associates activity with protection. Thought becomes a form of presence. Analysis becomes a way of staying prepared. When those patterns slow, the nervous system may interpret it as losing control, even when nothing is wrong. Overthinking is often misunderstood as excess thought. In reality, it is excess vigilance. The brain scans for potential emotional threats, regret, shame, rejection, loss, and fills the space preemptively, hoping to prevent them from emerging unexpectedly. This is why silence can feel loud. At moments of calm, unresolved emotions rise closer to awareness. Feelings once postponed, grief, disappointment, longing, no longer have mental noise to hide behind. Peace threatens to reveal what has been held back for years, and so the mind resists. Not out of defiance, but out of fear. There is also identity attached to this struggle. For those who have spent a lifetime thinking, anticipating, managing, the mind becomes a sense of self, being the one who thinks deeply, the one who notices everything. Letting go of constant thought can feel like losing identity, not gaining freedom. Psychologically, this creates an internal paradox. The mind longs for rest, yet mistrusts it. It desires quiet, but fills silence instantly. Peace is wanted conceptually, but rejected experientially. Understanding this tension changes the narrative. The difficulty is not a lack of discipline or awareness. It is the natural outcome of a mind that equates movement with safety. The unfamiliarity of peace is not a personal failure. It is evidence of how long the mind has been protecting, and protection, once necessary, is not easily unlearned. Peace is often mistaken for silence, for the absence of thought, for a mind finally emptied. But the mind was never meant to be erased. True, peace does not arrive when thoughts disappear. It arrives when they no longer feel like enemies, when the inner world becomes a place that can be entered without armor. For a mind that learned to stay on guard, this shift is subtle. It is not a sudden release. It is a gradual softening, a loosening of the need to control every mental movement. Thoughts may still arise, but they are no longer immediately challenged, corrected, or pushed away psychologically. This is integration. The nervous system begins to recognize safety not through constant alertness, but through consistency, through the experience of thoughts appearing without consequence, emotions surfacing without collapse, silence existing without threat. This does not require discipline or force. In fact, force reinforces the original conflict. The desire to silence the mind often mirrors the same control that created unrest. Peace grows in environments where nothing needs to be managed in order to be acceptable. There is relief in allowing thoughts to exist without interrogation. In noticing them as passing states rather than instructions, the mind begins to learn a new association. That presence does not require vigilance. This is where the hidden desire finally reveals itself. Not the desire to think less, but the desire to stop fighting, to no longer live in opposition to one's own inner experience, to rest inside the mind without needing to escape it. Peace, then, becomes relational, a way of meeting the self with patience, a willingness to stay present even when thoughts are imperfect, repetitive, or unresolved. Over time, the mind senses this shift. It loosens its grip, not because it is told to, but because it feels safe enough to do so. And in that quiet coexistence, something changes. The mind no longer feels like a battlefield. It becomes a place where one can finally remain.